Hi, Nathan. Welcome to the podcast. Rain and you.
Right.
Very, very happy to have you here today. And I know that you've had this journey where you have overcome, or rather used neurodiversity in your as your strength. You're extremely creative, and I know you work in the creative field because I can see a lot of paintings behind you. So we will come in this podcast. I think what we would want to understand from you is your entire journey from the beginning to where you are today, and how are you using your ventures to impact the life of so many people. Uh, and before that, Nathan, why don't you give me a quick introduction about yourself?
Yeah, so basically, my name is Nathan, and I guess, the director of the social enterprise called Neuro Expression, which has basically a purpose to empower neurodivergent
Yeah,
people and
yeah.
specifically neurodivergent artists. And my background, I guess my educational background is I had a degree in media arts. I did two postgraduate degree in social work, and then I did a final master's degree in moving image. So that's a little
That's a
introduction.
lot of educational qualifications that you have. So, Nathan, for the purpose of the podcast, let me just give you a background of who the listeners would be.
Yeah.
Now, as I just mentioned before we were starting, that Iyurved, this company, works in the space of nutrition. So we provide nutrition for active brain, active body, for
Mm,
children, for teenagers, for young adults.
mm,
And a lot of the consumers, a bigger segment of this are children who are neurodiverse.
mm,
So the listeners would most likely be their parents,
mm-hmm,
between the age group of 2 to 20, I would say.
mm.
Parents of this children in this age group. So, uh, before I start, Nathan, my first question, I want to take you back to your early years, and I
Mm.
would want to ask you that what was that one struggle that remained throughout, which you had to learn to manage?
That's a really good question. Well, I guess because I have dyspraxia. I've been diagnosed with dyspraxia formerly at
Hmm.
university, but there's also a strong suspicion of what they call I guess it's called autism now. It was previously there was other labels such as Asperger's, etc.
Yeah, yeah.
I think so. One of the main issues that I've had is because most people, when they talk about dyspraxia, they talk about the fine motor skills and the gross motor skills. So riding a bike was always a challenge. Writing was a challenge, but the speed of thought is a challenge as well. So it's the processing speed, and that's always been
Yeah.
um,
Okay.
a significant issue.
Okay. So, in these growing up years, Nathan, you would have met so many different kinds of people, whether it is school, your teachers, your
Mm,
college, now your work life.
yeah.
What do you think people misunderstand about autism?
Well, I think when it comes to the educational perspective, I think there's an important premise here, and that is typically the world has been built by neurotypical people. Therefore, as a default, it's built for neurotypical people. So if
Mm,
you take the educational system primarily would have been built for neurotypical people. You remember information and you process it. So I think that's where the disadvantage comes for people that are neurodivergent because it's not geared
yeah,
for them.
yeah.
The educational
Yeah.
system, the institutions aren't geared for them. So I think that's one of the issues. And but the issues are quite multifaceted because you can have the social barrier, and that's people in
Mhm,
general. But then you can have the individual barriers. So, for example, you can have an institution issue in the educational system. But then you could have the issue of the individual teachers. So there's
mhm,
some great teachers that have great awareness on neurodivergence and autism, but then there's some that don't, and that's
mhm.
reflected in their teaching practices. So it's a combination of things, really. And I think one of the things that I always talk about is learning, how we learn. And I think when we take people that either have autism, dyspraxia, dyslexia, etc., the learning style is significantly different typically than to people that are neurotypical. So one of the important things I think within the educational system is to introduce um, to understand people's learning styles. So to understand what type of learner are they? Are they auditory? Are they visual? Are they kinesthetic? And then some would call this multisensory because some people make a differentiation between learning styles and multisensory. But it's about incorporating the learning styles of the neurodivergent individual and then building it around that. And I think that can be one of the significant barriers. I feel like I've given you a really
Understood.
long-winded answer, but I
Yeah,
hope that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Understood. Yeah, yeah. So, you know, a lot of children now would be going through what you've gone through in the past.
Yes.
And they would be in schools, maybe entering colleges, maybe also entering workspace. So,
Mm.
what is your advice to other kids and young adults who are autistic?
Oh, that's a good one. I think one of the benefits of today's world, like I'm really old. So when I was younger, we didn't have like say YouTube, which is a visual learning platform. So when YouTube became prominent or more prominent in my 20s
Mm-hmm.
and late 20s and 30s,
Mm-hmm.
I was drawn in by the educational content. And then I realized that I'm a visual learner, a visual and auditory learner. So one of the things I think is essential is to have the self-awareness to not understand what not only understand that, oh, I can learn this way, but what's your most effective way of learning? So
Yeah.
when you go through the educational system, you need to try and understand your most effective way of learning and then gear yourself towards that. And that will enable you to do better in the educational system, but also in the work system. So that's one thing. The other thing, and it may be different in different countries, but in Britain, there's a big thing about the Equality Act and reasonable adjustments. So within the British context, it's really
Mm-hmm.
essential not only to understand reasonable adjustments, to actually implement them. So reasonable adjustments is quite subjective, but it can be things like having flexible hours. It can be things like having IT software. And I think it's important to identify that a lot of neurodivergent people, because they experience the world differently, they have creative ideas of how to solve problems, so how to remember names and things of that nature. So my thing would be jump into your creativity and use your neurodivergence as a way, as a source to be able to solve problems. So understand that your neurodivergence, your autism can be a superpower in the sense that you can be more creative because creativity is more likely to be second nature. Just to verify that there was I will get this wrong or slightly wrong, but there was a study done on dyspraxic doctors. And in that study, they found the question was like, how are they able to cope within this work environment? Or that would be one of the questions. And what they found was that they had creative ways of finding
Yeah.
solution. So my thing would be lean into your creative ways of
Okay.
finding solutions.
Good point. Good point. So now with so much of more awareness coming in, you know, people are getting more aware. I think people at workplace are more aware.
Mm.
Parents generally have more idea than what they had maybe 20, 30 years ago. And so there's some amount of acceptance maybe that, you know, saying it aloud that I'm neurodiverse or I'm autistic. What do you think? What are the risks of saying that I'm autistic?
I think one of the risks, first of all, I agree with your point. I think it's very different. When I was younger, it would be seen, unfortunately, in a very negative way. So I totally agree with that. Sorry, was it the question, what is the disadvantage? Is that right? The disadvantage?
What is the risk of saying that I'm autistic?
Sorry. I think one of the risks of saying you're autistic, like, would be if you go for a job interview and you say I'm autistic, it depends on how that job interviewer views autism, right? So, say, for example, let's say I'm interviewing someone and I'm neurotypical, and let's say I've had great experiences with people that are neurodivergent.
Hmm.
I'm likely to have a good, I'm likely to look at this
Hmm.
favor. But if I've had a bad experience,
Yeah,
then I'm likely to look at it
yeah,
unfavorably. And unfortunately, a lot of us, we have transference, don't we? We label things. So I think that in the work situation, that's where there could be a greater risk. I also think in the educational system, a risk of people not understanding, maybe the teachers not understanding, maybe the peer
yeah,
group, the classmates not understanding your condition, your way of thinking. You know, we see neurodivergence as a natural variation, not as a weakness. But some people may not have that level of empathy, and that can reinforce negative attitudes.
Yeah, yeah. So, Nathan, you touched upon this point that, at times people around you may not even know what is autism, may not even understand. So that is also true with families themselves who may not even understand that their own child may be on the spectrum. So a lot of people grow up being undiagnosed. So my question to you is, what are some signs of undiagnosed autism?
That's a really good question. Well, what I would say is that I'll answer it this way. I think you've made a very good point there because it's not just about what autism is, it's how
Mm-hmm,
autism is manifested in that person.
mm-hmm,
So typically someone with autism, because again there's different trains of thought, but a lot of people would make the connection that a lot of people that are autistic may have extreme OCD. I know that I do. So seeing the OCD patterns, the extreme passion into a subject. So I'm very passionate about my social enterprise. I'm extremely passionate about that. I'm extremely passionate about boxing, like I know everything about it. So that level of passion, which because I think there's a difference between passion and obsession. So if someone has an obsession of something, then that may be an indication, it may be a sign. But what I would urge people to do, I clearly had symptoms and signs, but for whatever reason, even though my mum paid for tuition when I was younger, the only time when I got like a diagnosis or I got looked into by an educational psychologist was actually at university. And that's because they were pushing it. And actually, the autism part didn't get discovered until later on because they weren't looking for that. And even when they did discover it, there was a caveat because they were like, we're not actually here to test you for this, but we know that you have it. We so strongly know that you have it, but we haven't been paid to test you for that. So it's, I guess, from like a parent perspective, it's like if you see the traits, I would urge people to get the testing, to get the diagnosis, but then on top of understanding what autism is, what neurodivergence is, understand it from the perspective of the person, because how it
mm-hmm.
looks in Sally will look different in Jack. So it's not just like a one size fits all.
You actually touched on this point several times that, teachers should understand, people should understand, parents should understand, where you're working, they should understand. But I think that is where there is some amount of unawareness still. So, what does the society not understand about autism?
I think what society may not understand about autism is they may look at it as a negative as opposed as a difference. And I think that's one of the clear distinctions. Also, I think that there may be some, obviously it's very different because each country and each place will have different perceptions.
Hmm.
So, for example, someone may have a perception of someone's intelligence based on whether they're neurodivergent, whether they're autistic, even though the evidence wouldn't indicate anything positive or negative towards someone's intelligence. So there can be that lack of understanding. And also, I think there's a lack of understanding that the educational system isn't geared towards supporting people with autism. And that's why some people can unfortunately fall through the cracks. It's not due to a lack of ability, it's due to a lack of understanding and a lack of awareness. This translates into many things as well. So it can be the teacher interactions, but it also can be the interactions at the in society, but it can also be the interactions at the barbers when you're getting a haircut, where someone doesn't really understand the social awkwardness at the, in various different facets. So in social environments, typically, um, also even in social environments, and I wouldn't probably be able to articulate this now, but I found out the other day that there's actually four different types of introverts. So just because you see someone being social doesn't mean that they might not have
Got
certain characteristics, so they don't
it.
understand the
Mhm.
complexities. But I think the main thing is not understanding it as a difference. And I think there's a lack of awareness, and this is something that you speak about, which is very interesting. The whole thing of the pivotal role of diet. That's
Yeah,
something that's really not truly understood by many people.
understood. Yeah. I'm coming to my favorite part right now, Nathan, because I know you work tremendously in this space. You have multiple different projects going on, whether it is your exhibitions or um, book, a lot of things that you do. So speak about that. What are different ventures that you run to support the neurodiverse community?
Yeah, so basically when I started my social enterprise, Neuro Expression, the main purpose was to create a neurodivergent friendly society. So mainly it was supposed to be exhibitions, facilitation, and I also wanted to do some form of product-based business. And so what we're doing currently, we've put a book together called Neurodiverse Voices, and it's a collection of myself and four other people that are telling their stories, and those stories about diagnosis, education, art, and business, because obviously there's that correlation with the art. And it's talking about their experiences and basically understanding neurodivergence from their perspective. So that's something that we're really proud of, and that'll be coming out on May the 19th. There'll be a book launch locally. Additionally to that, and we also do exhibitions. And in those exhibitions, the primary objective of the exhibition is to celebrate neurodiverge, neurodivergent
Artists.
talent. And
Mm,
what we're trying to do in those exhibitions, we're trying to do a variety of things, but one of the things we're trying to do is to implement sufficient reasonable adjustments to not only celebrate neurodiversity within the artist, but also invite the neurodivergent community. That's another thing that we're doing. And those artists are paid, and those artists will be celebrated. And we're really hoping that we just really want to express that, neurodivergence is about difference. It's not less
yeah,
than, it's about difference. So yeah, they're so the book launch, the book and the exhibition, that's something that we're really proud of. And yeah, we definitely want to put that out there. And of course, we want to engage in facilitation and liaise with other people that share the same mission
of
and that
course,
share the same goal.
of course. So I think with this podcast, maybe those who are watching, and like I told you before the session, many of the children that I have come across personally are artists themselves. Some are celebrated artists and just out of the world paintings. And I'm sure those who are watching this may just reach out to us so that, what we were discussing, that we can do something together, be it in India, be it in the UK, wherever. But, to provide a platform which is more global to the artists because yeah, I think I agree with you. It's not about being less or more, it's just a different way of being. Thank you for this, Nathan. I just love talking to you today.
Thank you. It's really been a pleasure, and thank you for having me.
Yeah.